one of the things that we are spending a lot of time doing is having conversations with neighborhood leaders, neighborhood representatives. We're going to be good neighbors.
When you walk on campus, it feels like a warm hug.
In many ways, it's sort of a national philanthropy at its best.
We have been in Troy for a very long time, and it's time to come home.
Welcome, everybody, to a special episode of Pathbreakers, a podcast from the Kresge Foundation about what it takes to cut through the noise and red tape and all of the obstacles to progress. I'm Tracy Pearson, and I work on the communications team at the Kresge Foundation.
Hey, Tracy. I'm Jamie Bennett, and I work at the intersections of arts, culture, and equitable community development. On this season of Pathbreakers, we've been talking with community leaders who are forging new ways forward, solving urgent problems, and creating new paradigms.
That's right. We've talked with people who work in community organizing, finance and economics, arts and culture, as well as public health, higher education, and even environmental justice and public policy. All of these folks are breaking paths in their communities across the country.
Places like Memphis, Tennessee,
Fresno, California, as well as Oakland, California,
New Orleans and Detroit,
New York City,
Springfield, Massachusetts, Flint, Michigan,
LA, Atlanta, and today we're right here in my hometown of Metro Detroit.
That's right. We're close to Tracy's hometown. We're actually in Troy, Michigan today.
Very close, yes.
Which is the current home of the Kresge Foundation. Topic we're going to come back to at the end of the episode. But Tracy, we're here today to talk with someone who breaks paths for the Pathbreakers.
Yes, it is a pleasure to welcome my boss and the Kresge Foundation president and CEO, Ralph Rapson. He has been with the foundation for almost, or maybe more than 20 years now, Rip?
Almost
20 years.
That's right. Well, welcome, Rip, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Yes, thank you for being with us on our special episode.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
So today we're going to talk with you. We thought we'd sort of start out by getting your take on the Pathbreakers. How have Tracy and I been doing this season? What are the great stories that have been told? We want to hear a little bit about your own journey, sort of some of the ways that you've broken paths yourself. And then we do, spoiler alert, have a big announcement coming up at the end of the episode, which Rip is going to share with us.
Yes, and Rip will not get out of our wonderful, entertaining, and hard-hitting lightning round of questions.
Yeah.
So, Rip, over the season, we've featured many different Pathbreakers who are creating all sorts of bold and creative, unique change across the country. They're taking risks. They are letting leaders follow their instincts for change and being guided by community input. And so one of the things that I wanted to ask you as the CEO of Kresge, you direct a pretty significant amount of money, something like $160 million.
Every year, right?
Every year in grants.
Yeah.
What are you taking into consideration when you make those decisions about the types of risk you invest in, the types of leaders you invest in? What are some of the things that the team collectively talks about?
Well, you've ticked off a lot of them, Tracy. I mean, it is courage, it is integrity, it's values alignment with community, it's predisposition to make sure that the community's voice is reflected in the work every day, not just occasionally. But one of the things I've been struck by as the podcasts have rolled out is the extent to which each of these Pathbreakers has had a relationship with another sector of community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Some are pushing against or working with the public sector. Some are trying to introduce the private sector in different ways. Some are trying to mobilize the nonprofit, the civil society actors in a very different way. And that, I think, in some ways is a thread through all of them, that they are trying to understand that everything we do at community is interrelated, and there are complex sort of systems that sort of surround everything we do. And so just working in one dimension doesn't work very well.
Nope.
Right.
And so each of our Pathbreakers, I think, has understood that in very different ways and has tried to stitch together a different kind of way of working that sort of breaks through barriers, that engages a much broader sector of community than maybe just the people they serve directly. But it's a fascinating sort of fabric weaving exercise that these Pathbreakers do. It's not just sort of hunkering down and doing one thing all the time the same way. It's really trying to make sure that the totality of a community is recognized in the kind of solutions that these folks are going at.
Yeah. I mean, $160 million a year, almost 20 years, that's an awful lot of grants. And when you think back across all of those, is there one that you sort of stands out to you as one that was exactly the right money at exactly the right time, that sort of blew up in a way that even you and the program officers didn't expect?
Well, because I've known Jamie for so long, I'm not going to answer that question quite that way. I will. I'll come back.
It's fine.
I'll come back.
It's fine.
But I do think that one of the things that has been so remarkable over the course of the 20 years that I've been at Kresge is the extent to which philanthropy has changed. In one dimension, it's moving an enormous number of dollars out the door each day to extraordinary folks. But in another way, it's trying to understand what our roles and our responsibilities are in the broader civil society. And so whether it's making a grant to a nonprofit in Fresno, or whether it's commissioning research in San Antonio, or whether it's pulling together a network of human services providers across the country, every time you invest in people, you're surprised.
Yeah.
And so in some ways, this kind of strategic, which is an overused term, but it's sort of intentional, purposeful, long-term grant making is inviting surprise and inviting something that you didn't expect. But to be a little bit more specific, one of the most obvious examples is the Marygrove project that Dean Moji talked about in her podcast. But let me not use that one because it was truly extraordinary in both its conception and its execution. But the one I'd point to is something called Hope Starts Here. This was an effort we began a decade ago to try to take the early steps in figuring out how to build an early childhood development system that was a little bit more coherent, a little bit more well-resourced, and a little bit more impactful in the city of Detroit. So many kids in the city of Detroit enter kindergarten not prepared to go on, whether that's emotionally or developmentally or intellectually or otherwise. And so we joined with the Kellogg Foundation to try to figure out what is it that the community believes could be done that would augment the opportunities for low-income kids in the city of Detroit to get ready for kindergarten, but then put together a suite of supports that would enable those kids to actually be successful once they got to kindergarten. And so we spent a whole year talking to community, trying to understand from parents or providers or kids themselves what they might think would be most appropriate, and then stitched together a framework. So far, so good, sort of classic philanthropic intention. But then what happened is that we were able to grab private sector folks, public sector folks, nonprofit sector folks, and put together a consortium of folks who could actually create sort of a delivery mechanism into the kind of aspiration that we had identified at a community level. So all of a sudden it became really important that the facilities were healthful, they were safe, they were beautiful. All of a sudden it became important that the parents could talk to one another and compare notes. All of a sudden it became really critical that the providers could band together and work collectively for higher wages. All of a sudden we were able to identify a policy agenda that might actually push up to the state when they had excess revenues that they could then push back down to the early childhood system. And in fact, 10 years on, that has been an enormous success. There's still an enormous gap of opportunity in young people in the city of Detroit, but we have made very concrete strides in helping young people get ready for kindergarten and beyond.
Yeah.
I think, Tracy, if we sort of think back across all the episodes, children is maybe the one topic that's come up in every single conversation we've had.
That's true.
There's that sort of Maasai wisdom that when two warriors greet each other, they sort of ask, how are the children?
How are the children?
Because if the children are doing all right,
the society's doing all right.
Yeah.
And if they're not doing all right, we have work to do.
Well, and Wendy Jackson of our staff, who directs our Detroit work, has often said that at the end of the day, the litmus of whether we've done our job well or poorly is whether the children are better off.
It's wonderful having a young person in the city of Detroit and all of the things you all have done, just not just with Hope Starts Here, but some of our colleagues who have helped sort of implement different programs throughout the city and neighborhoods. I want to ask you, what do you think is driving the change in how we approach the grant dollars and the way in which we sort of allocate them and give them out within cities?
Maybe, Tracy, it's a little bit what I was describing earlier, is that rather than sort of thinking about grant dollars in sort of a siloed, one-dimensional way, I think we are increasingly asking how an early childhood grant matches up with a transportation grant, matches up with a housing grant, matches up with an open space grant. Because essentially what you want to do is grab the web whole. You want to make sure that these places in Detroit are places that parents and kids and elders want to live. They want to make a life there. And you can't just do it in one dimension.
Right.
You've got to do it across multiple dimensions. And so one of the big changes at Kresge over the last 10 or 15 years is the extent to which we have each of our programs talk to one another about whether they can't do joint grant making.
Yeah.
Can you get the arts and culture team to actually partner with the human services team? Can you get the environment team to partner with the health team? And I would say that probably 30 to 40% of our grants are now multi-programmatic grants, just recognizing the reality that people don't live their lives in one dimension. They live their lives in complicated relationship.
So true.
And, Rip, philanthropy is a little bit of a niche thing, right? I don't think 6-year-old Rip Rapson dreamed he would grow up one day to, lead a social impact investing and grant-making program in America's cities. And we've spent...
it's possible.
Well, it's possible. I'm guessing you wanted to be a firefighter or, what did you want to be?
Well, it explained why I wore a suit when I was 5 years old.
That's right. Right. That's actually your birth tie that you were wearing. But we've spent some time with each of the Pathbreakers talking about sort of their own origin story. How did they arrive at doing the work they wanted to do? And, you are the son of an architect who went to law school, worked in environmental justice, were deputy mayor of Minneapolis, were a mayoral candidate for Minneapolis. But you ended up as president of the McKnight Foundation in Minnesota and now president of the Kresge Foundation. When you sort of look back over that life, how did that path come to be? How did you end up here sitting in this chair?
Well, in some ways, Jamie, it was sort of less of a path than sort of a creative serendipity. It was a series of experiences and exposures and adjacencies to leadership that helped me realize that in order to make social change, you need all of the sectors pulling in the same direction. And I thought, well, that's hard for the public sector to do, right? It has an election certificate, it has certain responsibilities back to community. It's sort of circumscribed in its realm of motion. It's hard for the private sector to do. They have quarterly earnings reports they've got to meet and sort of short-term values in many cases. Hard for the academic community, hard for the journalistic community. And one of the things that was sort of interesting about my increasing exposure to philanthropy was the extent to which it could sort of shapeshift. Sometimes it would behave a little bit like the public sector and that it would use lots of different tools to advance social change. Sometimes it looked a little bit more like an academic sector, so taking this long view, patient capital, waiting forever to get stuff done, too long so often. Sometimes it acted much more like the nonprofit sector, just making sure its focus was on issues of equity and social justice. And philanthropy has this rare privilege of being able to sort of mix and match when the circumstance requires. And sometimes we do act like a different sector, but when you actually push all of that together, it becomes a very unusual sector if properly deployed, because you can use capital, you can use convening, you can take risks, you can take a long-term view, you can take a short-term responsive view. And so I think after coming out of public and private and nonprofit work, it just seemed to me that the opportunities to pull all of that into a different methodology of social change had real promise. And that's what attracted me first to McKnight and then to Kresge.
Another theme that we've had throughout sort of our conversations this season has been unusual approaches to work. And there have been many instances in these conversations where I am talking to someone or interviewing someone and I think to myself, how would Rip draw this out in a picture? Because there are many CEOs who are in the boardroom, they're in their suits, they look wonderful and lovely. But if you look over at Rip, sometimes when we're in big meetings, he
not
has
so wonderful, not so lovely.
He has his pen, and you see him sort of moving this pen, furiously, and he's creating sort of a masterpiece based on what's sort of going on, the dialogue in the room. And I just wanted to ask you, how did you come to find yourself in a place where you could sort of hear complex issues and scenarios, and then you take them to paper?
Well, it's interesting you would phrase it that way, because some would ask, why do you draw? And I think that misses the point you just made. It's trying to take complexity and distilling it into a form that can sort of serve as a point of departure for a different kind of conversation. You know, the actual origin story for this is pretty clear. I have absolutely no artistic talent. I remember coming home in seventh grade.
Disagree.
False modesty.
No.
Yeah.
Wait. I came home in seventh grade with my sort of master class in pencil drawing, which was a turkey, and my father took one look at it, and he walked out of the room. And this was one of the great architectural draftsmen of the 20th century. So I knew my future was not in that direction. And so I never did learn to draw. I was never trained to draw. But I found myself one day in a meeting at the Kresge Foundation, and the conversation was just incoherently complex. It was 40 academics who specialized in kids and kids policy, trying to help the Kresge Foundation figure out how they could sort of retool their programs to meet the full challenges of kids. At any rate, after about 3 hours, I just got lost in the peacock of the room, just people strutting all of their knowledge. And so I started doing this little sketch. And after about 3 or 4 minutes of this, a shape kind of began to emerge about how I thought the major themes were lining up and the relationship among them. And Ralph Smith, who was then the vice president of the Kresge Foundation, was running the meeting, looked over and he said, "What is that?" And I said, "Well, Ralph, I'm not just doodling. I'm just trying to make sense of this conversation." And he raised his hand and he said, "All right, we're going to take a break for 10 minutes." And I thought,
what have I done?
He's going to yell at me for not paying enough attention to his meeting. So he took the piece of paper and he went and made 40 copies and brought it back and handed this piece of paper out, the sort of schematic piece out. And the people around the room were so offended. I mean, these were serious academics, and the idea that you could reduce their complexity to this sort of simple diagram was blasphemy. So, anyway, the meeting proceeded, and it kind of teed off of the drawing. And so Kresge actually asked me to continue doing this for them. They were developing a new strategy, and they wanted a way to sort of pictorially represent it in a way that wasn't just all 40-page PowerPoints. And so slowly, I began sort of drawing more and more. And I had the enormous good advantage of being at something called the Design Center in Minneapolis, which was run by a really gifted illustrator, drawer, conceptualizer, a guy named Bill Moorish. And Moorish took this drawing that I had done for Smith back, and he said, "What is this?" And I thought, here we go again. And he said, "Well, let me just show you a couple of things that might make this more interesting." And so he started giving me these little pointers about how you can do clouds, or you can do arrows, or you can do three-dimensional cross-sections, or whatever it was. At any rate, to make a very long story short, that began a process in which I increasingly felt comfortable trying to take complex ideas and complex conversations and make them a little bit more accessible, a little bit more legible. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. They're almost never end products in themselves. They are almost always an opportunity for people to look at a piece of paper and sort of locate themselves in it or not. And then that becomes a point of departure for a different kind of conversation.
Amazing. Before I'm sure we want to plug the book, right? The Rip Rapson Drawn to Challenge book,
right.
very important. But before we do that, can we go back to your dad for a second? You and I once had a conversation about your dad, who was the architect, Ralph Rapson. And you said to me once that you thought he was a perfectly good architect. You thought he was an exceptional architect teacher, a teacher of other architects. But you said he revolutionized the way that architects often did renderings. Do you remember what I'm talking? Will you tell this bit? Because I think this is helpful insight.
My father came of age in the 1930s at Cranbrook, where he
Academy of Art here
Academy of Art,
Detroit.
in Metro Detroit, and he had this incredible array of colleagues, including Ural Saarinen and others who sort of helped define the mid-modern era. And they were all brilliant in their own way. But what Dad was really good at was drawing. And when he began his architectural career, he started in a very conventional way with a bunch of conventional firms and drew just like the rest of them. He sort of drew in section and what I think was expected at the time. But he increasingly, as he developed his own style, started populating his drawings with people. And he took drawings away from the sort of the frontal section view and would take the camera up and look down, or take the camera sideways and look in, and would show a woman hanging clothes or a child playing on the grass, or how people would actually move through space. And I'll never forget, Jamie, I was having a conversation with the great architect Caesar Pelli, and Pelli taught first-year architecture at Yale. He was the dean of the Yale School of Architecture, and he said to me, "Your father, revolutionized drawing." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, he was the first person to really humanize architecture. All of the great architects, even Frank Lloyd Wright, never put people in their drawings, and they certainly never put people using the space in their drawings. And your father did both." And he said, so I actually consider his drawing of something called the Case Study House, which was a 1940s project in California, to be the single most important architectural drawing of the 20th century.
Wow.
And I said, "Well, you say that to all the guys." And he said, "No, really." He said, when you look back at that time, this was so unusual and it was so idiosyncratic that you always knew that it was sort of a Ralph Rapson drawing and a Ralph Rapson project. He said, since then, others have copied it, and computers have populated drawings now with people for quite a long time. But for a long time, that was a highly unusual act.
That's amazing, because it's a standard now.
Yes, it's
you can't create
hard to
space.
imagine.
Yeah.
Hard to imagine doing an architectural scheme now without that in it. But in 1935, that was not what was done.
Okay. Yeah. Very interesting. Jamie first shared a little bit of that story with me, and I was like, how come Rip never told us this? This is so interesting. So thank you.
Well, it's because none of that talent was passed down. I wish I could claim some of it.
Right. Did you? I've never asked you this. What did you take from your mother, the librarian?
Oh, thank you for asking. My mother was a librarian of the children's collection at the University of Minnesota, the Curlin Collection. And the Curlin Collection was known for its books of children's illustration.
Also drawings.
Also drawings. And so she would bring me into her workplace, and I would climb up the stairs to the 5th floor, wherever it was. And the minute you opened the door, there were just these stacks of books everywhere, and there were these drawers that you could pull out and see the original drawings for Peter Rabbit or something else. And it was just magical. And so when she began collecting her own very small collection of books, it was sort of the classics, but it was much more books in which the drawings were really extraordinary. And I probably learned to look at drawings before I learned to read. I probably learned to read by the time I was in 8th grade, but the drawings had really sort of stuck with me from a very early age. And again, it's the sort of the ability in a way that sort of takes you out of a paper reality into something else. It sort of triggers a part of your brain that thinks about ideas and stories and possibilities very differently. My drawings clearly don't do that, but I think there was sort of this impulse that there is more beyond just the written word. There's more beyond the spoken word as a way of communicating ideas to people.
Yeah, there's you did a drawing. I can't remember the context, but you sort of drew the art and culture ecosystem in Detroit. And it involved sort of the wilds, the stuff that happens naturally. There was like a greenhouse element. What is the stuff that philanthropy wants to make sure is nurtured? It's something actually Omari Rush, who runs Culture Source here in southeastern Detroit, he and I had a conversation. He's just published something that's sort of the art and culture ecosystem based on a conversation he and I had, which was actually based on my memory of that drawing, which I don't know that drawing made the Rip Rapson Drawn to Challenge book. But there's some other great things that
I knew
in here.
Omari was doing it, so I didn't dare put it in.
Yeah, that's great. So, Tracy, I think it's time for you to earn your Kresge salary on the communications team. It's a big news day at Kresge. What's going on?
It is an amazing news day, and I'm so excited for today. We have some big news, and I think that as a Detroiter, I probably am especially excited. We have some news to share, Rip, and I will let you go ahead and share that news with all of the folks that are listening.
We have for a long time been located in Troy, Michigan, just down the street from where we're recording. And it's a lovely facility, and it's a lovely town, but it's not Detroit. And as you said earlier, Tracy, Detroit is our home. It has always been the Kresge home. It's where Kresge was founded. and where it grew up and flexed its muscles and became Kmart. I mean, the K in Kmart is Kresge. It was essentially as the 5 and dime store business got bigger and bigger and bigger, and they sort of morphed into the sort of these department stores, Kmarts. And matter of fact, it was when Kmart got so big that essentially the family got out of the business because it was no longer really a family business. And so they sold their interests and helped capitalize the trust that is the Kresge Foundation. But we have been in Troy for a very long time, and it's time to come home. And so we announced today that we are moving into Detroit, into the northwest quadrant of the city. And that is only a very small part of the news, because the real news is that this is a partial investment in a much larger suite of investments that are intended to help continue the revitalization of the Live 6 neighborhood, the Livernois 6 Mile neighborhood in northwest Detroit. And so in some ways, the announcement is sort of like a set of Russian dolls. You know, at the center is Kresge's decision to move into a new headquarters and build a new headquarters. It'll be on the Marygrove campus, where we already have a substantial investment. Surrounding that, and the next doll out, is a reimagined and reconfigured campus that sort of draws together all of the extraordinary activity on Marygrove and invites the community in a very different way to think about this space as public space. And then the largest of the dolls is the broader neighborhood strategy, where we're going to be investing in housing programs, commercial corridor revitalization programs, open space programs, community engagement programs. And all told, we think this is probably the single largest commitment that has ever been made to a neighborhood in the city of Detroit, and probably one of the larger commitments that's been made anywhere in the United States. But it's not so much the magnitude, but the sort of the multidimensionality of it. It's sort of building from the inside out and inviting the outside in. And I think it's important to say that if this were just an office relocation decision, it would be interesting, but not particularly. But I think because of the way we're trying to integrate the facility into the broader campus and the campus into the broader community and the community into the broader city, I think it will have enormous repercussions over the long term. And it certainly signals our intention to be part of the Detroit community for the next 50, 100 years.
Amazing. And that brings to mind, what does this represent in terms of the trajectory of the foundation?
Well, it's tempting on one hand to think that this represents a significant departure from past practice. And to the extent that we're actually moving 120 people down to Detroit and working with the Marygrove community to make a more integrative, holistic community asset work, it is a departure. But in many ways, it's not a departure. We have been investing significantly in Detroit since the moment I arrived. And early on, it was sort of tempting to say that a lot of that investment went into downtown, along the Woodward Corridor, and in the Central Business District, and along the riverfront. But I think it misses the point that we've always invested in the neighborhoods of Detroit. We've always thought that you can't do just a Central Business District revitalization of a city. It needs to be done in balance with a broader set of community investments. So whether it's housing or early childhood development or commercial corridor revitalization or open space protection or education, all of those things occur in neighborhoods.
Yes.
And so we can stabilize the tax base of downtown Detroit, and I think we've contributed significantly to that through the Q line and through corridor revitalization funds and the like. But it always had to be done hand in glove with a neighborhood strategy. And so in that way, I think it's not so much a departure. It's simply a fortification, an acceleration, an intensification, but it's not different.
And Tracy, you've got a special interest in this project because you live not that far from the Marygrove campus.
Yes.
This is news that's just breaking today. How's the neighborhood going to react? What are their hopes, dreams, and fears?
Well, I grew up not even 10 minutes from the neighborhood. I went to school on the campus, what is now the Marygrove Elementary School, which used to be Bates Academy, used to be, it was a Catholic high school. So I went there, my mother taught there, my aunt taught there. So I spent a lot of time on the campus. And I told Dean Moji that when you walk on campus, it feels like a warm hug. The space feels like love. It feels like care. And I'm really excited to see the thoughtful way in which Kresge will come onto that campus. And it's just also keeping in mind that, and Rip can attest to this, our presence is but a small percentage on the campus. There's life there already.
Right.
There's a lot happening there already. And so just how thoroughly and mindfully and with love, as Wendy Jackson, who runs the program in Detroit, says, we do things with love.
Yeah.
And so if we're coming onto a space that already feels like a hug and it feels like love is moving in the air and it's good, people should be excited about it. Yeah.
That's a high standard, but it's the only standard, right? We simply have to respect and honor all that has gone before and then all that will come later. And we're going to be good neighbors. Yeah. One of the things that we are spending a lot of time doing is having conversations with neighborhood leaders, neighborhood representatives, not to have them go through one more planning exercise, but just to make sure that the kinds of investments, the kinds of initiatives, the kinds of engagements that we have on Marygrove are the kinds of things that add to the neighborhood. They don't distract from other work. They don't push people aside. And I think we need to be very, very careful that everything we do is something that builds community. It doesn't sort of fragment community further.
Yeah.
That's I think it's really exciting. Yeah. And it's in many ways it's sort of a national philanthropy at its best.
Yes.
Because you're building on local momentum, you're working with local leaders. You have some pretty big minds that are both inside Detroit and outside Detroit that are going to work with you all on this. And so I think this is, how long is it? When's the ribbon cutting going to be? How long a project is this?
I laugh because our project team tells us that it'll probably be 3 years, and I tell them, no, it will be 2. We need to fire on all cylinders. And I think because we have such a coalition of the willing going on, whether it's the Marygrove Conservancy, whether it's the Live 6 Alliance, whether it's the neighborhood block club leaders, everyone is excited that I've spoken with about the project. And so I think there will probably be bumps in the road, things that we won't get quite right. But I think everyone brings to the project enormous goodwill. And I think when you have enormous goodwill in community, projects move more quickly.
I mean, what do you think? Is there an office pool yet on whether Rip's going to get his 2 years
I'm
or the
hoping
project
Rip gets
team?
his 2 years. That means my commute gets cut down from like 24 minutes to 7 minutes. So I am all on the Rip bandwagon of 2 years.
Excellent.
You know, what's so funny, too, Jamie, is that when a number of years ago, when the Marygrove campus was at risk of being shuttered, and Dean Mochi talked about this, we had a decision to make. We could either kind of let the natural process of markets sort of shutter the campus and create something of a black hole. Matter of fact, Aaron Siebert, our wonderful head of social investment, said, well, we'll just get it on the rebound. Let's go, let it go into bankruptcy and we'll get it on the rebound.
He's a finance guy.
And there's a tale to that story that is a little bit more charitable to Aaron, because we said, no, of course not. We're not going to let that happen. And Aaron then became the greatest advocate for the project and has done kind of more than any single human being could possibly do to make it possible. But one of the very first things we decided to do was to take that Hope Starts Here framework and land it on the Marygrove campus, because you already had the School of Education at the university developing the K-12 programming, which was spectacular and beyond imagination. But then we thought, well, if we are going to help build out a new model of early childhood development, why don't we do it on this campus? And so that has been an extraordinary addition to the neighborhood. And what makes me think of it, Tracy, is that a lot of folks in the neighborhood have said, you know, I was thinking that maybe we might not stay. We might go somewhere else. It's just too hard to raise children in this neighborhood. And now, all of a sudden, you have a preschool program, you have a K-8 program, you have a 9-12 program, and the University of Michigan has said that if you move through that system as a Detroiter, you get automatic admission to the University of Michigan. Extraordinary. They have never done that. And so you really have this preschool through post-secondary continuum that is, I think, unlike anything I'm aware of anywhere.
What I love about the Hope Starts Here, the award-winning building that is on the campus, it has won international awards. It's not just a beautiful building. The space, when you walk in, it's so thoughtfully designed that as a parent, you look forward to sending your little one there. Like, just the landscaping, the windows, the lights, how they've thought about just the design of the corridors is beautiful. And I think when children are learning and growing in beautiful spaces, it's an affirmation of their importance.
Yeah.
So,
We've had a terrible time getting parents out of the space after they drop the kids off.
When I tour, I just want to sit down and take it in. Like,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It's absolutely worthy of all of the awards it's received. So,
Well, and I don't mean to pile on, but it just seems to me that then becomes another reason to do the campus right, because the renovation of the high school has been spectacular. These are beautiful turn-of-the-century buildings, turn-of-the-1900s buildings. And if we can make sure that the entire campus has that quality of warmth and holding of community, then we'll have done our job well.
Amazing. Dean Moji, who's leading a lot of this work, kicked off our series.
yes, she did.
She also shared that some of the kids are actually helping to design those
Yes.
spaces, that the
Design
kids aren't just
thinking.
inhabitants of the
Yes.
spaces, but the kids are actually helping to shape the spaces they're in. And is it Eric Howard, who runs the project in Southwest Detroit, often talked about sort of visual equity, and that one of the conditions of being a young person is you're not in control of how anything in your life looks. Anyway.
Well, so wouldn't it be spectacular, Jamie, as we design this new building, because we are going to design a new building and a new grounds, again, in conjunction with the Conservancy. Wouldn't it be cool if those kids were sitting right there helping us figure out how to do this? And they will.
Yeah. Sorry. So what I was supposed to do with that transition before I got lost is to say that not only did Dean Moji kick off this series, this season of Pathbreakers, she also inaugurated our favorite tradition, which is the lightning round. So this is where we're going to see if you deserve to be CEO of the Kresge Foundation by asking you a series of hard-hitting questions.
I think we know the answer to that one.
Right. So Tracy, I think you're kicking
Yes,
this one
I
off.
will.
Is that right?
What is an essential part of your morning routine?
Oh, I'm embarrassed to say that every morning of my adult life I have run.
You have a run?
I've run. I know it's so tedious and uninteresting, but whether it's 20 below or 90 above, I go slogging out. It's now more of a waddle, but it is out in the open air every morning.
Just stop. What's the best thing to draw with? What's the best drawing implement?
Oh, there are these sort of wonderful new pencils that can actually change colors. And so I used to have to figure out where my reds were and where my blues were. Now you can actually turn a little knob and you only need one pencil. I think I still have 500, but you only need one.
If you could spend one day as any animal, what would you be?
I think an otter.
An otter.
When we were growing, when my son was growing up, he had this fascination with otters. And when we would go to aquaria, he would stand in front of the otter case, and he would move, and the otters would move with him. And I've often thought, wouldn't it be nice to have that kind of rapport with a human being?
Interesting.
Amazing. What's the first book you remember reading?
It was probably Pinocchio. And it wasn't the Disney Pinocchio. The actual real version of Pinocchio is a terrifying book by an Italian author.
Yeah.
And we had it in our library, and I made the mistake of opening it, and I was just traumatized for years. I don't think I read another book after.
Do you collect anything? And if so, what?
What do I collect? This is a terribly Monday. I collect T-shirts from other cities.
Oh, that's not terrible.
Well, it comes in
actually
handy
not
if you have to go
interesting.
running in the morning.
We'll have to stake you out.
You come
see
equipped.
what cities you're representing. What's the best part of summer in Michigan?
Oh, I think clearly if you can get there, being on the northernmost reaches of Lake Michigan.
If you could create a holiday, what would it be?
Maybe it would be National Architecture Day.
Ooh.
If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would you have dinner with?
I actually did. It was Stephen Hawking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Hawking was giving one of his very final lectures and using the voice technology that made that possible. And I was invited afterward to sit at a very small dinner with him, and he didn't have to say a word. Just being in his presence was inspirational.
That's amazing.
Speaking of dinner, what's your favorite thing to make? Doesn't have to be dinner. It could be breakfast, lunch, brunch.
Oh gosh, I think
If it's a mimosa for brunch, I won't judge you.
I think it would be going to the local Kroger and getting some kind of icing topping, and then putting it on pretty much anything. It doesn't much matter.
You're not allowed to say Detroit, and you're not allowed to say Minneapolis.
Oh.
What's an American city everyone should visit?
I think New Orleans. I think there is a magic to New Orleans beyond the French Quarter. I mean, but when you think about the complexity of what that city has gone through and how it's both rebuilt to its past but rebuilt to a future, and the resilience of the folks in New Orleans remind me a lot of the resilience of the folks in Detroit.
Where do you do your best writing?
The computer has sort of changed that. It used to be holding up in a study and kind of walling myself off and doing longhand work was what I would do. Now it's just the kitchen table, just because you can go get the icing that you got at Kroger.
But there is something about that pen to paper that just feels good, and then you can look at it when you're done or close the page and you feel like you've accomplished something. That just doesn't come with minimizing the screen.
Oh, so, absolutely not.
That's true. Yeah. And so we usually end by asking folks, who's someone who broke a path that made your career possible? Who do you look to as a pathbreaker in your life?
There have been so many leaders who have sort of modeled different kinds of behavior in their sectors. I had a mentor at the law firm. I worked for a congressman. I worked for a mayor. I worked for a designer. But, in some ways, the person who sort of entered my life first was a superintendent of schools in Minneapolis who asked me to lead a project to help define sort of a Bill of Rights and Responsibilities during a particularly tumultuous period of Minneapolis when we were desegregating our schools and going through the anti-war movement and everything else. And the fact that he chose to trust in a young person and backed us all the way and permitted us to do our work unimpeded was an enormous gift of how leadership can be both risk-taking and risk-accepting. He was an extraordinary leader. His name was John B. Davis, and I kind of carry his image with me pretty much wherever I go.
Tracy, this is a little bit of a bittersweet moment for us. This is our final episode of what we hope is the first season of Pathbreakers. What's been your favorite part of the season?
Oh, wow. Talking about just the change taking place in cities, learning about the different aspects of how people are able to do their work. That has been really eye-opening for me.
Yeah. I wake up in the morning and I'm now on a diet of how much MSNBC I can watch. And it's so easy to get so depressed. But then you talk with someone like Dr. Beverly Wright from New Orleans and what she's accomplished in her career and is still accomplishing. When you talk to Richard Burrell, I've just been filled with so much hope about what's possible, what can actually happen. But I think for now we're going to leave it here.
We'll leave it here for now. See what happens.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Rip, for joining us today. It was a wonderful time talking to you. We so appreciate all of the knowledge and insights that you've lent today, as well as sharing this amazing big news with us.
Yeah, this was so much more interesting than I thought it was going to be. No, I'm totally kidding. But this is a big deal about Kresge relocating. And so thank you for coming on our podcast to break the news.
Oh, what a pleasure.
Pathbreakers and newsbreakers.
Thank you both very much.
And Tracy, I think we've got to read ourselves out of this episode.
We do. We have to officially put some icing on this thing. Rip Rapson is the president and CEO of the Kresge Foundation. We've put links in the show notes to the announcement about our new headquarters and to a great video of Rip demonstrating his drawing process.
Pathbreakers has been produced by the Kresge Foundation. It was founded in 1924 with a mission to promote human progress. Today, Kresge works to expand equity and opportunity in America's cities.
Read the stories of all of this season's Pathbreakers and learn about our grant-making social investing work in Detroit, Memphis, New Orleans, Fresno, as well as cities across the U.S. at Kresge.org. To hear more stories from the Pathbreakers, be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Our producers are Juliet Heinley and Zach Rosen, managing editors Krista Yankee, show art by Rochelle Baker, and creative direction by Alejandro Herrera. Special thanks for this episode to Podcast Nation Studio here in Troy, Michigan for hosting us, and to Mark Marks for his work on the video version of this episode.
I'd also like to say thank you to all of my Kresge colleagues for their support and enthusiasm on this project, especially Jennifer Kolzicki, Sarah Traxler, and of course, thank you, Ralph Rapson, for letting us do this. See y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.